Welcome to Mom Boss Central. I'm your host, Alexia Hoffman. This podcast is where entrepreneurial moms like you and me come together for real and raw conversations filled with practical tips, genuine stories, and a whole lot of girl power. But it's not just about listening, it's about building a community. If you haven't already, make sure to join at mombosscentral.com. So whether you're sipping on a cup of coffee, pouring yourself a glass of wine, or tuning in on the go, get ready to join the conversation and become part of our supportive Mom Boss Central community. All right, Lauren, welcome to the show. So happy to have you on. Will you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hi, thank you so much for having me on. My name is Lauren Connolly, and basically a little bit about me. My husband and I have been married for almost 20 years in September, and we have an amazing 15-year-old son together. His name's Connor. My husband, John, is retired military with 3 deployments overseas and 1 stateside for Hurricane Katrina. And I worked in a corporate job until about 2020. And both of our jobs, obviously for him, not so obvious for me, but it kept us away from our family for a long time. So when we were furloughed in 2020, we decided that we loved hiking and camping and spending more time together and that our time is precious. And we decided to start our own business together.
That is amazing. Can you tell me a little bit more about what your business is and how you guys decided to take the plunge into starting it?
Yeah. So, 2020 was kind of a crazy time for everyone. And when we were furloughed, we were like, okay, well, what are we going to do in the meantime while we're waiting for our jobs to, I guess, come back online or go back to them? And I love photography and being out in nature. And my husband is a geographer. And I kept seeing all these postings for needing drone pilots for real estate. And I'm like, how cool would that be to get paid for my pictures?
Yeah.
We can also use drones for mapping and things like that. So I approached my husband with the idea like, hey, why don't we start our own drone company? And at the time, he was in the process of retiring from the military, and they have an awesome program for their veterans to set them up for success in the civilian world. And that paid for his schooling to learn how to fly the drone and get FAA certified, our website.
Wow.
And having a mentor to help us get off the ground, pun fully intended. And then also under that umbrella, I spent a lot of time in 2020 painting. And that was a very healing process for me. So under the JL Aerial Views umbrella, I started Wild Development Studio. And my mission there is to bring nature to people through art and adventures.
That is amazing. That is so cool for our listeners, for people that aren't watching the podcast, but listening. Lauren has amazing art behind her. And I can tell how talented she is just from even from far away, I can see that your artwork is beautiful. Were you already painting prior to 2020, or was that a hobby that you picked up during COVID? How did you kind of get into it?
I've always been an artist, and that was, in high school when you're picking electives, it was always art and art focused. And when I went to college, I thought I was going to go down the graphic design route, and I decided I didn't really like it, and the technology is not where it was today. 20 years ago, it was a lot harder.
Yeah.
And I didn't really enjoy it, and I loved animals, so I went the biology route, and I was working in a corporate job in biology for a long time. Kind of got away from doing the artwork that I love so much.
Wow, that's amazing that you were able to prioritize that during COVID. I think that was kind of a benefit that came from that season of us sitting in our houses saying, what do we actually like to do now that we have time to explore it a little more? So I think that's amazing that you were able to create your business from that and gave yourself the ability to pursue it. Did you and your husband, as you kind of discussed doing this, did you have any hesitations or fears about actually starting your businesses?
Yeah, my father is an entrepreneur and he's very successful now, but we watched him through the years. There was some lean years, and it's always going to be kind of scary. When you work for a corporation, you are given everything that you're supposed to do. It's kind of reliable that you're going to have a paycheck. When you're an entrepreneur, you don't really know when the next paycheck's gonna be or
Yeah.
like that. So it was kind of scary. We have a lot of support that has definitely helped.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing that you have your dad to kind of talk to or, share those experiences with, because without having someone who's been through it, I feel like it can be very isolating and very scary to not know what to expect. How cool that you got to kind of see it already, long term. So I think that's great. Did you guys end up going back to your jobs after? Do you do both, or what does that look like now for you?
Well, he ended up retiring, so he does the business full time. When I was asked to come back, and I was in a job that I thought was my my dream career,
Mm-hmm.
and it just got to the point where I was working 50 to 60 hours a week, and I was missing out on so many events in my son's life, and being pulled out of that corporate job for 3 months really opened my eyes and helped me to prioritize what actually is important in life. And when they asked me to come back, I was like, no. I was miserable. It got to the point where I was crying in the bathroom on my lunch break and
Mm-hmm.
micromanaged. And I don't want to work for somebody else's dreams. I want to spend my time on my own dreams and my own values, because it eventually got to the point where their values weren't lining up with what my values were anymore. And at the end of the day, that's important, and family is important.
Yeah.
I did decide to quit that. And we live in Cincinnati area. In the wintertime, flying drones is not exactly ideal. People don't really want pictures of their house when the leaves are off on the trees and things like that, and it's kind of snowy and whatnot. So I fill my time with the artwork in the off season and the podcast.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love so much of what you said, and how you spoke about deciding to leave, because, I think so many of us get a position. It was our quote unquote dream job. And then we supposedly arrive there. We've achieved the goal, but then it's no longer fulfilling, whether it's right away, a year after, 10 years after, but eventually that one time dream job is no longer doing what we expected and wanted it to do. And I think for me, when I was in that season, it felt like failure, but really that was growth. And I think to identify that and then have the courage to say, I'm not going to continue to stay here, even though it once was what I wanted, is so huge. Can you talk a little bit about what your mindset was like in that season that gave you the courage to take that leap? And, for somebody who might be in a similar season, what they might need to hear?
Well, I guess to paint the picture a little bit about what was going on in my job, and I guess also to say that at a job, you're just another body filling a role, and it's a role that
Mm.
can be replaced. At home, you are irreplaceable. So make sure you're
Yeah.
spending your time with the right people. And if your job tells you that they are like family, that is a huge red flag. And towards the end of my career, I was really looking for ways to involve my son. And thankfully, they had summer camp, and I enroll him all the time in summer camp. So
Oh,
I
wow.
got to, sneak in and say hi during my work time. In 2018, my husband deployed for the final time, and I
Mm.
discussed how things were going to change at home with my work, because I had a long commute with rush hour traffic, and I would have to drop my son off at school, which meant I was going to have to come in later, and that was in the worst part of rush hour traffic. So I was
Mm.
already stressing out about, getting to work on time, and my boss was very understanding and told me that that's fine. If you arrive late, you make up those hours, after 5 o'clock. And I did that every single time. I was even told I could work from home. I'm like, this is even better. Like, everything's going to work out. This is great.
Yeah.
And I'm an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur. Like, we're high performing people
Yeah.
and outside the box thinkers. And in my last review in 2020, which was days before the world basically shut down, my boss did a review for me, and the manager was in the room. I'm like, well, this is odd. And my boss and I had already had some problems where my boss was giving out my schedule to someone, and I told them to stop, because basically I'm a single mom raising a son. I don't want people to know when I'm in work and when I'm home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went to HR. that was a huge lesson. HR isn't there to protect the worker. They're there to protect work.
Mm,
And my boss did not like the fact that I went to HR. So we had been kind of butting heads for a little while.
yeah.
So when we were at the review, usually I had very high reviews. This one, I had a very low score on attendance. Worst review in 16 years there. And I was like, why did I get a low score? I was told I was allowed to come into work late as long as I made up the hours. I'm still making my time. I'm still doing all the things that you're asking me and more. And
Yeah.
that was a huge lesson learned. If you are doing anything outside of the norm, like when you're taking care of kids or whatever, get it in writing in an email, because I did not do
Yeah.
that, and I could not
Mm.
defend myself to the manager. And they just kind of looked at me and they're like, sorry. So like I said, I'd been spending
Oh
lunch in
my
the
gosh.
bathroom and micromanaged. And, there comes a point when you decide what is worth your time and how you want to spend it. And I
Yeah.
decided I don't want to spend my time like this anymore. It's not a job. No job is worth missing time with family.
Yeah.
So that was what was going through my head when, after 3 months of being outside and the healing power of nature, and really just, look at these cool things I'm getting to do that I was doing at my job. That was
Yeah.
too. Like, I was holding on to this job thinking it was my identity. I
Mm,
thought I could
that's so huge.
do it anytime.
Yeah, definitely.
Plus side, I got to spend more time with my son. So when they asked me to come back, I was like, there's no way I am going back to such a horrible work environment when I'm
Yeah.
already in the process of starting my own work environment. And now I know what I want that to look like.
Definitely. I think that's really amazing that it almost felt like natural for that transition with COVID, that it gave you the space to kind of see what it would be like and almost test the waters of, okay, if I don't go back, what would it look like? Because I think so often there is this mindset of, without knowing, like the unknown can be scary, right? Like, what will it look like to leave? What will my days look like? What will my priorities look like? And so to have those 3 months of testing it out and seeing, okay, I can make this work, I think is so, so cool. And, like I said, a good thing that came out of a tough times. I think that's great that you were able to have peace with that decision and like have confidence when you made it instead of uncertainty that might have otherwise been there. So that's really cool. How has it been to work with your husband? I also work with my husband, not 100%, but I work with my husband somewhat. And so I would love to hear like how it's been for you and what advice you have.
It has been really great because, when he was deployed, obviously we had missing time there. And when I was working so much and going to school, we had missing time there. So it's great getting to spend time together.
Yeah.
However, they are your spouse, they're your best friend, and it is so much easier to, like, once they go off. But you know what I mean? Like, something happens, you're like, hey, what the heck? Yeah, I thought we
Yeah.
got this. And so on one hand, like, communication is a little bit easier, but on the other hand, it can get heated sometimes. We are
Yeah.
very spiritual, so we learn that when we're going into a job, we will stop and say a prayer and make sure everybody is safe and protected. And that seems to help. Just taking that pause and being thankful for where we're at and thankful that we're working with each other. I think that helps to put things into perspective before we go into, because we've had a couple of stressful jobs. And when we stop and take that pause, that it helps.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think to acknowledge that we are quicker to jump on our spouse or whatever word you want to call it. But I think that acknowledgement is so important it's because we're comfortable, right? We're around them the most. They know us. And my husband and I have had that conversation of like, why do we treat each other worse than our friends or than like a stranger? And I think so much of it is because we're comfortable and we know the ins and outs of each other and we have deeper conversations and we've shared more with them. When they do something that's not what we're expecting, they know better, right? Like it's like I hold you to a higher standard because you are my husband than I would hold some random person to, or some, employee who's just there as they have to be, where it's like we have a working relationship because we choose to have that. So how do you navigate managing your priorities regarding work, your role as a wife, and your role as a mother?
Lately, and I'm considering this a win, even though it's not very traditional, I've been prioritizing time with my family first and working more non-traditional hours. And especially with cell phones, it's so easy to just work all the time. So I
Yeah.
think scheduling that this is my family time and then scheduling my work around that helps me to get my priorities right,
Yeah.
and get my family time in, and then work is work time and family time is family time. So my parents are getting older. I've spent time volunteering with my mom once a week, and I help out with babysitting with my nephews a few times a month. And lately my role with my son has been a chauffeur and taking him from his high school events. So
Yeah.
getting everything in the calendar first and then listing out all of my work projects and then kind of puzzle piecing them into my week. And that might mean that I'm working on a Saturday morning or on an evening, but I have the freedom to do that.
Definitely.
The other thing that's been a win is looking at what I'm doing and thinking, can this wait? Like,
Yeah.
I was editing a podcast and my son wanted to play tennis with me. And it was so powerful that I was able to put a pause on what I'm doing, drop everything and play with him for an hour, and then just come back and pick up right where I left off.
Yeah, definitely.
There's always going to be a struggle to find balance. There will always be more work to do. They grow up so quick. And I used to hate that when my son was a newborn. They're always like, oh, they grow up so quick. And, it doesn't feel like that when you're, covered in spit up and tired and you're like, what is the next stage going to be? But, it does happen so quick that it is so important to spend as much time with them as possible. And if you find a career that you're passionate about and you understand your why behind what you're doing, then you'll find a way to make it work.
Definitely. Yeah, I think I agree so much with everything you just said. And even being in the newborn side of things, I mean, I have the 3 babies. They're under 18 months, and it does even go quick. I mean, just to look at my twins compared to my youngest and how fast it all goes. I know we were looking at photos last night, my husband and I were, and it's like, oh my gosh. I said to him, because we have pictures of like going on walks with our twins and they're in the wagon. It's like, all of those hard times that we had in the first 6 months, first year with our twins, none of that, even now, they're only 18 months old, none of that is what I'm remembering. I'm remembering all of the good moments that we have pictures of and like the highlight reel, because it does happen so fast. And for me, it's like I look back and I'm thinking about their first time crawling, or their first time we put them in the high chair and tried to feed them. And, as they have started to talk, and it's like, I remember all the good times. For me, it's not like I have a highlight reel of the hard nights in my mind. I mean, yeah, sure. I remember I was tired, and that's probably why I don't remember a lot of it. But also, like when we look back, it's not like the first thing, at least for me, the first thing that doesn't come to mind is like all the rough days. It's all the good times. So of course it's like so fleeting when you look at it that way, where in the moment and you're in those hard seasons, it doesn't feel like it's going to end, but you blink and, like, I'm sure for you, 15 years goes by quick, and whatever season that I'm in, it's all been fairly quick for me as well. So, yeah, I love that you spoke about how quickly it goes and how you pause your work to prioritize your son. I think that can be so hard to do. Like you said, there's always work to be done. So how do you navigate that? What is your mindset like to give yourself permission to put a pause on what you're doing and to make your son the priority?
Well, I think a lot of that was through my lived experience in missing so much time with him. And I am not the type of person where I say I regret things, because if that didn't happen, then I might not be where I'm at right now. And yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow that I missed that time with him when he was 5, 6, 7 years old, but he is still around. He's still kind of a kid. He doesn't, he just has his temps and he's learning to drive, but he's not, away to college yet. So I feel like I still have some time that I can spend with him, and knowing that there is always going to be work to do. It's
Yeah.
never going to stop. Hustle culture makes us feel like we have to have everything and have success right now. As
Mhm.
long as I am taking some small step every single day and hitting those points that I want to hit in the business, then I'm happy. And there's a quote by Nelson Mandela that helps me a lot. It's always seems impossible until it's done. And when
Mm.
I'm overwhelmed, I repeat that to myself, and it just helps to remind me that it's okay if my house is a hot mess.
Mhm.
It's okay if things aren't perfect. Just take one step at a time and you will get to where you need to be. And it's so important to remember to enjoy the journey and savor the moments, even the ones where you are covered in spit up, or like I said, in my stage of my life, driving my son around, like savor those moments.
Yeah.
As long as you spend some time laughing and enjoying each other's company, at the end of the day, that's a success.
I love that. I think that is so huge because it is all about the perspective of making the most of it, whether you are covered in spit up or you're driving him around. It's like all about, I think, our view on the experience. I know my husband and I live kind of outside the city, about 30 minutes. So we have a long drive. I guess long is relative term, but after living right in the city, to move outside 30 minutes, it's a lot more drive time. And I think a lot of people hear that and they're like, oh my gosh, like you're in the car so long. And it's like, I savor that time. I listen to so many audiobooks. I listen to podcasts. If my husband and I are going somewhere, I love that time for connection. Obviously not every time are we able to have like uninterrupted, but that a lot of that time, that's like the time that we get to connect the most because it's uninterrupted time. We're both there, not like we have to talk to each other, but we get to talk to each other. And our kids are contained. For us, that's like a win. But I think a lot of people would not have that perspective, and you could miss out on those opportunities to savor the experiences, like you said, with driving your son around. I mean, if your mindset was, oh my gosh, I'm so sick of driving around, you might miss out on those connection points or the time that you have to hear about his day and do things like that. So I think that's amazing that you're so in touch with that without being quote unquote like too late. It's not like you waited till he was in college to realize that those were, special experiences for you to share.
And the cell phone, like, and think, oh man, I wish I would have scrolled on Facebook or Instagram more.
Yeah,
So when
yeah,
we're
that's
in the
huge.
car, we try and, whoever's not driving, get off your phone. Let's have a conversation. And,
Yeah.
I go through the 20 questions with my son. What'd you learn today? Who did you
Mm,
sit with? What was for lunch? And I just
yeah,
keep the questions coming and try and ask open-ended questions so that
yeah.
a little bit more engaged instead of a yes or no. But
I love that. That's so great. I think that's super tangible for somebody listening. Can apply that. You said there's 20 questions that you go through like pretty consistently, or is it just happen naturally over time, or how did you decide to do that?
it's kind of happened naturally over time. I kind of think of his day, like, what did you do in your block is what they call it. It's kind of like a homeroom.
Mm,
What was chemistry like? How did that test go? So I try and remember the things that he told me that he has on his list. Today's an A day. I know you don't like A days, so how did you get through? And
yeah.
how's your friend doing? So it's just kind of thinking about the process of his day and asking questions accordingly.
Yeah, that's so great. I mean, because he is older, how has it been for him? Like, has there been any kind of transition for how you guys interact from when you were at your corporate job to being an entrepreneur?
It's the end of the corporate job. I was taking him on a lot of weekend trips so that we could get that time together. Like I
Mm,
would drop everything with work and I would purposely go to the cabin and we don't have any service there. So if you've emailed
yeah,
me, sorry, I can't check it. I mean, at one point
yeah.
we were told, even if you're on the toilet, check your email for work. And I'm like, no, how about I get some me time?
Ah, seriously.
So that helped when I was home a lot more. And last year, he loves sea turtles, and so do I. We went for 2 weeks, just him and I, to St. Pete Beach, and we volunteered with the sea turtle trackers.
Oh my gosh,
We got
that's amazing.
every morning and looked for sea turtle tracks together. Yeah, I didn't even schedule a day off for us. And I'm like, well, come on, we're on the beach. Like, do we really need a day off? We're just walking up and down the beach looking for sea turtle tracks, picking up trash. At the end of the night,
Yeah.
we cover up the holes so that if mom sea turtle was coming up to shore, she wouldn't fall in the hole.
Oh my gosh, how that is precious.
It was so much fun. And yeah, there was some complaining, but I think, looking back, I complained to my parents a lot about things. I think that's just what kids do. So we just try and shift the narrative and focus on the positive. And, that's an experience that he still tells people about all the time. I don't think it's
Yeah.
anything he forgets anytime.
Yeah, that's so special. I love that you were able to do that even in the midst of the crazy busy season of not having a lot of time to connect. So to be so intentional and, think of things to do, that's amazing. I love how intentional everything that you're speaking about doing is, because I think it's easy to say be intentional, but to hear how you've acted that out and how thoughtful you are to what your son likes and the trips that you take and to not have cell service. I mean, I just think that you are giving me inspiration of not having excuses, right? Like, oh, I want to get away from work. Well, don't give yourself the option. Go somewhere where you don't have service. Like, that maybe sounds obvious to you, but to me, I mean, I need to book a trip with no cell service. Is what I'm thinking about. Has it changed the dynamic of like that feeling of overwhelm or burnout? How has that shifted in your household with your husband retiring, you becoming an entrepreneur, your son going into high school in those older years? Speak about what that mindset and dynamic has looked like in regards to interacting with one another.
Not gonna lie, it can be hard at times because there are seasons where it's not as busy with the drone business, and you have the weather that works against you, and then also a lot of what we do is with real estate, and if the housing market's doing really good and the houses are selling quick, they don't need to spend the extra money to get a drone picture. So that kind of ebbs and flows, and it's hard at times to stay positive. Thankfully, it seems like if one of us is kind of feeling down about it, the other one of us is at least a little bit better to kind of pep the other person up. And
Yeah.
every step, even if it's a failure, because we've had our failures over the years, every step is a lesson learned. Another thing that I love to do is I keep track of all of our wins. Write them down, see how far you come, because when you are having a really bad day, it's easy to just, because I'm ADHD too. So I get that rejection sensitivity. So if something bad happens, it's like, oh, the entire world is ending.
Yeah.
I have a list of, oh wow, here is all my wins and all the things that we have done and how far we've come. It's like, okay, get some sleep, wake up the next morning refreshed, and start over again. And that usually helps. And really being in contact with our local chamber has helped us out too in networking. This as an entrepreneur, sometimes it's hard because you're not seeing the same friendly faces every day like you would if you were going into, because we work from home. If we were going into a corporate job, you'd see the same people over and over. You get into a routine. So really trying to find spaces where you can see the same people over and over again helps, even if it's just going to get coffee in the morning and doing a little bit of work at the local coffee shop, and going to those chamber meetings seem to help and help with networking.
Definitely. That's amazing. That's just like another thing to be intentional to do, to track your wins and to try to see people in person, like tangible things that we can do as entrepreneurs to help ourselves and to continue to promote a positive mindset and a way to support intentionality as an entrepreneur and as a mom. So I love that you shared that, Lauren. Thank you so much for everything you've shared. I love your perspective, and I think it's amazing to hear how you prioritize your family. I think that's so special. And we're just so happy to have you as part of the Mom Boss Central community. So for our listeners that want to connect with you, where can they find you and what do you offer?
Well, the drone company is JL, like John and Lauren's, the JL
Mhm.
Aerial Views. And we are a high quality drone imaging company. And we specialize in real estate, construction, progression photography, and first person view videography. Those are your fun, tight shots that go through, you can fly through a window and you
Oh, yeah.
and out the other side. So my husband's really great at that. So that is the drone company. We service the Cincinnati area. And my company is Wild Developments Studio, and it's centered all around bringing nature to people, because that was a lot of my healing journey in 2020, was being out in nature and creating art. Firstly, I do that with the wildlife photography and painting, and then through my podcast, Wild Developments, where I talk to people from all over the world, from all different experiences and different angles. Like, you don't have to be a nature expert to have a great nature experience, and I want to hear everybody's story, so they share their experience to help inspire others to want to get outside too. And then I try and tie them all together by teaching watercolor painting, forest bathing, and nature journaling, because I guess that's the intentionality part with my business, is these experiences especially help people to just unplug, slow down, be present in nature, really develop that connection that they're missing. And this helps to reduce stress, it increases health benefits, and it also helps to create lasting memories.
I love that. That's so great. Well, thank you, Lauren. We'll have everything linked in the show notes below. But really appreciate you being on and look forward to connecting with you on mombosscentral.com.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Mom Boss Central. I hope you found inspiration, encouragement, and maybe even a few new strategies to rock your mom boss journey. Remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together. And don't forget to share the love with your fellow mom bosses. Make sure to join the community at mombosscentral.com. It's completely free and a space to connect with like-minded women. All you have to do is sign up and start connecting. Until next time, keep pursuing your passions and living authentically. We're so happy to have you as part of the Mom Boss Central community.